No, we're just so delighted to see you.
Thank you.
You and Representative Ichiyama allowed us to make quorum to open the meeting. Thank you very much, Representative. Appreciate it.
We're live on YouTube. We can open the meeting. So for Zoom, please keep yourselves muted throughout the meeting unless speaking. If you are a commissioner or designee, please keep your cameras on so that we can maintain quorum for different objectives. And mahalo everyone for your patience and for being here today.
Thank you, Leah. We're going to go ahead and do the roll call. When I call your name, say present or here, whichever you prefer. Let's go ahead and start with Representative Lowen.
Oh, you're on mute.
Just roll call?
Yeah, just roll call.
Okay, hi, I'm here.
Great. Representative Ichiyama.
Here.
Okay. Chairperson Hurd for Department of Agriculture.
Present and alone.
Okay. COO Casey Brown.
I'm present and I'm alone in my office.
Okay. And for DHHL, Deputy Director Dukat.
Present.
Thank you. And then is there a representative for the Department of Transportation? Do we see anybody?
No.
No. And then for the Department of Health, Dr. Felton?
Here for Dr. Fink.
Yeah. Okay. And let's see, Department of Education, excused. Director of the City and County of Department of Planning and Permitting. Anybody here excused? For Department of Maui Planning, do we have a representative excused? For Kauai County.
Present.
Present. All right. And for Hawaii County.
Dundo Curran, present and alone.
Thank you. And for the Adjutant General? No, excused. Member Nihi Pali, to my great sense of loss, has moved on, and we do not have a current manager for the Coastal Zone Management Program. Justine is now working for the U.S. Department of Commerce, NOAA, out at Ford Island and working on CZM grants, hopefully for all of us. And then for the DBED director, Monique.
Monique Schaefer here for Director Tokioka, present.
Thank you so much. That completes our roll call. And I think I want to acknowledge Gabby Sandoval, our new VISTA volunteer. Thank you. And so we'll go ahead with the minutes of August 10th.
Oh, sorry, it's November 8th. Sorry.
November 8th.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of November 8th for the 2023 Climate Commission Mitigation and Adaptation. Is there a motion?
I'll just add real quick that we have some corrections received from DHHL that we'll incorporate into the minutes. So the motion will approve minutes as corrected by DHHL.
Okay. Is there such a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Okay. Is there a second? Great. All right. You want to describe the corrections?
The project, as I was mentioning to Ryan just a minute ago, the project of special merit was conflated with this regional shoreline assessment scope of work, and the DHHL one is the project of special merit, although we've been participating in the regional shoreline scope too.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining that one. Okay, are there any other member comments on the minutes? Any general public comments? Okay, hearing none. Are there any objections to the motion? Seeing none, the minutes as corrected are adopted unanimously. Let's move on to our next item. We're going to have member updates on climate change initiatives. Let's go ahead and start with Representative Lowen.
Oh gosh, okay. Hang on, let me see if I can share screen. So I'm just gonna give an update on bills moving through my committee. I think that's what we were asked to do. And I'll try to keep this really brief. It says host disabled screen sharing. But I do have a couple slides.
Oh, yeah. You should be able to now.
Okay. Let's see.
There we go. We can see it now. Thank you.
Okay, you can see it.
Yes.
Um, is it full screen or is it big enough, I guess?
Oh, you just disappeared. We can see your desktop now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's not good. Okay. Strange, but okay, we'll just go with this. Is that big enough or should I?
I can see it
Yeah.
from sitting behind the tables, so it may be possible to just go ahead.
Okay.
Perfect.
I don't know how to turn off this animation
Oh,
either.
now
Okay.
you're at full screen. Go ahead.
Got
That's-
it. Yeah. Okay. So this is just me. You guys all know, and we did introductions. So I'll move on. I won't talk about every bill here, but this is just an overview of the bills relating to energy. Some you're familiar with from last year. They're coming back, but so there's the extension of the energy efficiency portfolio standards. That's just to keep the work on energy efficiency moving forward and keep the PUC empowered to keep working on that. And then we have some bills related to, or a bill related to doing an environmental assessment for geothermal resources and slim hole well drilling, and to appropriate some funds if that's possible to actually do some of the slim hole well drilling and try to identify where these resources might be. You can see here we're looking at long duration storage, just wildfire bills related to electric utility. I just threw on there because I think they're sort of related in an ancillary way. And then a lot of bills this year looking at distributed resources and rooftop solar, including how to streamline permitting, how to get state facilities to lead by example and install rooftop solar systems, and also add resilience to state facilities, looking at EV PV ready new construction and some other components on there. Next slide is clean transportation. So looking more specifically at transitioning the transportation sector. We have a bill this year looking at a clean fuel standard that kind of goes along with the changes to the biofuel tax credit, which are, I think, targeted at trying to increase the production of alternative fuels for transportation. And honestly, if you guys have questions, ask Monique, because she knows this subject matter probably better than I do. And we're working together on that. And then again, another bill from last year that would just establish a goal to have workplace charging at state facilities so people can charge during the day when it's most ideal for the grid and energy is cleanest and cheapest. Some other bills relating to EV infrastructure, and including this rebate for EV ready affordable housing. So that would just be a rebate per parking stall that's EV ready. And then we also have a bill for the Climate Commission actually to look at the vehicle miles traveled reduction policies, which I think we have to remember should always be the first thing that we're looking at when we're talking about reducing emissions from the transportation sector. Again, I told you I'm going really fast, so I'm keeping to my word. And then we're hearing, these are some of the bills from last year that that may or may not get picked back up. We're hearing this bill, in a week and a half or so, the climate impact fee bill. This is an admin bill to look at a $25 fee towards climate impacts. But I think that, whether this moves or not probably depends a lot on also the green fees bill, which Rep. Ichiyama might talk about further. But we did want to hear that measure because it's coming from the governor's office, but I'm not sure that both of those would pass. It would probably be one or the other. And then just looking at some of the bills from last year that probably won't get picked back up, but I still think are really important to come back to. We had the social cost of carbon bill from last year, which was kind of looking at an implicit carbon tax, and then the carbon tax bills, which are more of an explicit carbon tax. And I'm not going to hear the carbon tax bill this year. Just with the state's financial situation and a lot of different things going on, I don't think it would have much chance of moving any further than moving out of my committee. And so I think we'll just try to come back to it at a more opportune time. And then I just threw other related issues on here. These are kind of the big issues my committee is looking at outside of the energy and clean transportation and climate mitigation piece. One is cesspools. There's a whole lot of bills related to that. I think related to climate change, just in that protecting the reef is so important to climate adaptation, and solving the cesspool problem is a big issue for that. And then also I threw on here some of our solid waste management and waste reduction initiatives. And again, I think this is also related to climate change, maybe not talked about enough, but important to, one, reduce plastic production in the first place, because that is use of fossil fuel and emission source. And then also just the emissions that come from landfills and all of that. And I think that it's also just a way to look at the idea of a circular economy and different ways of thinking about how we consume and consumerism, and how all those things add to climate issues in the big picture. So yeah, a really brief presentation from me. And
Thank you, Rep. Lowen. Members, any questions for Rep. Lowen?
figure out how to stop sharing.
Members of the public, any questions for Rep. Lowen? Okay, if not, thank you very much. And we'll move on to Rep. Ichiyama.
I'm not quite sure how to stop sharing my screen. Did it stop?
We can't see anything, but it's black, so it looks like you
Yeah,
are.
I think that's still me, but it's like
You should be at the top of the screen. There should be a green bar around it, and you should scroll to the top, and then it should say stop sharing. Let me see if I can.
I need to minimize. See it.
Pause for technical difficulties.
I removed your
okay, there we go.
co-host.
Kicked me off. Okay, that works.
Okay, Representative Ichiyama, please proceed.
Thanks. I just have two bills to share. Is it possible for me to share my screen? Oh yeah. Okay. So hope you all can see that. The first bill is House Bill 1545 relating to adaptation pathways planning. We worked on this bill with OCCL, and it is to create a process for OCCL to create adaptation pathways, hopefully statewide, but we're starting out in one area with this bill to be like a model, and to have OCCL work with both public, private landowners, community members to come up with a broad approach to adaptation pathways in a broad area. And we haven't yet figured out which specific area this might be, but I think the intent is to try to pick an area where it's not houses falling into the ocean already, but where that could hopefully be prevented. And then the second bill I wanted to share is House Bill 2081. And so as Chair Lowen mentioned, this is another version of a green fee, looking at the transient accommodation tax as a mechanism. We are still kind of tweaking the language on this. And so I think where we may settle on is something closer to a $10 per night fee, and that those funds would be used for natural resource conservation and restoration protection. And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ichiyama. Members, any questions for the representative? Online? No, I don't see any. Members of the public, any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to Chairperson Hurd for the Department of Agriculture. Do you have an update for us?
we have many bills. I guess biosecurity was the big topic this year. So I don't really have anything that I can think of for climate change, except that we did oppose a bill that created a new commission for carbon taxing, I believe, and we deferred to the current gas, the one that lives in your house, Mary Alice.
The Greenhouse Gas Sequestration Task Force
That's
Chair.
Yeah, that would be it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Casey Brown. I know you said you were, just joining to start learning about the impact of climate change on Native Hawaiians, but any initiatives that you are interested in?
No, nothing to share right now, but I'm thinking about things that I could possibly share in the future, because we have an advocacy team that also tracks on bills, and we may locate some relevant bills for this group that we could, share that we're tracking on. We also just won a REPI grant, which is solely dedicated to the climate change mitigation resistance, and so it's for agroforestry and reforestation on our lands. So we're also actively trying to, play our part in terms of OHA as an office and owning our lands in this effort of climate mitigation strategies. But yeah, I'm listening and I'm thinking about how OHA can help and play its role here. But yeah, nothing to report right now. Mahalo.
No, thank you. Thank you. Moving on to the Deputy Director for DHHL, Katie Ducat.
Hi, so we do have a bill, an appropriations bill for geothermal. So the legislature did award DHHL, I believe 2 sessions ago, startup money to do a study. So we did that. And based on that study, we feel like it is a good route to pursue further, more, I believe it's like you have to drill in order to test for water, and that would be primarily on the Big Island. And that involves a lot of money. So we do have a bill working its way through the legislature. In fact, it has a hearing tomorrow afternoon in front of a joint committee of Hawaiian and EET. To ask for that additional monies to pursue geothermal in earnest, because there are multiple reasons from DHHL's perspective. In addition to sustainability and helping energy, there are benefits to the program when it comes to geothermal if we were to pursue it in earnest. Other than that, a big topic for us, practically speaking, is cesspools, right? And the cesspools conversions. A lot of our homesteads are in areas that would be considered or have been identified as priority 1 red zones. And we really do need to figure out a way to address that problem. So our CIP requests include a lot of requests in our budget going forward to try to address and keep addressing conversion of cesspools in our homestead, especially our older homesteads. So those are the 2 big, I think, climate related. We have many, topics that touch on sustainability and climate initiatives, but those are the 2 top priorities I know legislatively that we are working on with legislative session underway.
Oh, great. Any questions from the members or comments? I'll make a comment. I love geothermal because it has a small footprint, no carbon emissions whatsoever, and is dispatchable and can be firm load. But I understand that there has to be a source, and it is front loaded with the capital costs. So that's a challenge nonetheless. I'm looking forward to that first inter-island transmission cable to come from your lands on the Big Island and come over to Oahu. Yes,
I'll
Henry.
make a comment. Oh, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, it just, because this is the Climate Commission and we should be fact-based, I just would point out there was a study about the cost of inter-island transmission. It's very, very costly, and whether or not that's feasible is a really big open question. So I know a lot of people watch this, and I just want to make sure that that information is also shared.
Thank you, Rep. Lowen. Yes, there is a very big upfront capital cost, but perhaps a long, useful life if that issue can be surmounted.
Well, we can
Thank you.
leave it to the PUC to review the data and make these decisions, as is their job.
Right.
Two
Henry
comments
Curtis.
for life of land. First, while geothermal, nuclear, and hydro have very, very small greenhouse gas emissions, they do have some.
I stand corrected.
And second, the issue with transmission between islands deals with reliability. If Oahu is dependent on the Big Island for half of its load and the cable goes out, you would have a massive destruction of the grid. So you would need 5 or 10 transmission lines between islands, which would make it so prohibitively expensive.
Good point. Good point. I wasn't aware of that. All right. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay. So let's move on to Dr. Felton for health.
Hi, Diana Felton, Department of Health. A few updates from DOH. From our Clean Air branch, an update on the statewide greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Currently accepting review and comments on the draft final for 2020 and 2021 greenhouse gas emissions inventory report, and final comments are due by February 29th, so the end of this month. And the final 2020 and 2021 reports are anticipated to be by the end of March of 2024. For our climate and health program, we've continued efforts to grow our climate and health working group that's made up of healthcare providers, public health practitioners, researchers, academics, and community-based organizations. If anyone's particularly interested in this topic, we'd love to have you join us. I will note that we focus specifically on health and the effects on health from climate change. The program is also close to publishing a statewide vulnerability assessment, which identifies health risks from climate change that are anticipated in Hawaii and any available data sources. It also identifies data gaps and where we think study and evaluation should be focused to fill in those data gaps. And a final thing is that we are finishing a report on a study to look at heat-related illness and climate factors on Oahu. That report will also be out shortly, and I'll be sure to share when they come out. And the Department of Health is tracking climate-related bills across environmental and health sectors pretty broadly.
Thank you. Wow. Any comments or questions from members? Any from the general public? Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to, let's see, Director Kern for County of Hawaii.
We have our general plan that has been put out there, which has been quite an effort in the works, and it is being under review right now. We don't really have a lot of other updates from previous meetings. I will say, though, that probably you all know Bethany Morrison, who is formerly one of my long-range planners. She has gotten named by the mayor to head up the Office of Sustainability and Equity and Resilience. So she started that position on the 1st of February. She should be joining us here in a little while just to sit in on it. I want to have her kind of jump into these meetings with us to have another some more eyes on there. And that's a big deal. Otherwise, we're kind of like in the process of our code updates, our general plan updates, and all kinds of fun stuff, and trying to keep up with Kaina, which is really hard to do. So that's all I got.
Sandra, what's the name of your planner who has gone over to the Office of Sustainability?
Bethany Morrison. So maybe, yeah, I guess so. Obviously, I know Hawaii County. The mayor and the county council created an office of Oscar Office of Sustainability, Climate, Equity, and Resilience. That actually is housed within the mayor's office, but it's it's kind of like its own department.
Mhm.
There will be 4 members within that office. And Bethany was basically going to be the director of that office. So she's going forward for her county council appointment here momentarily. And they'll kind of hopefully be that glue that pulls all the departments together and keeps things on track from a sustainability side of things. When I see her come on, I'll wait for an appropriate moment so she can say hi. But her name's Bethany Morrison. She's been
Okay.
with the department for many years.
All right, thank you. Yeah, wave wildly when she comes on. Well, hopefully we'll pick that up. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Moving on to Director Hall.
For Kauai, we don't have any formal report. I can say non-led stuff. We are about 2 months away from releasing our first draft of the Kauai Climate Adaptation Plan. That's where we expect everybody's gonna start swarming it. This was good, this is horrible, this is what you need to change, which we're absolutely, it's part of the process. So we're looking forward to that draft coming out and then just going through those town hall community meetings. On the lead side, you know, there's of course a flurry of bills that I think we're all monitoring for different reasons. From a climate adaptation standpoint, I can say that one of the big measures that appears to be happening and has a lot of traction and steam is this zoning reform movement occurring at the legislature this year. I mean, there's always zoning reform bills, but there seems to be a lot of traction this year with the housing crisis, as well as in, you know, the shadow of Maui of trying to get even more housing. So those zoning reform measures, for the most part, Zendo, myself, Don, we've been a part of those discussions. We're not 100% in agreement, but for the most part, we're unified and taking a Taylor Swift type of "we are the problem, it's us" approach, saying like, yes, we need zoning reform, let's do this. But one thing I'll just put on the commission's horizon or radar is some of the measures are just going gung-ho of like, no, we need to increase density. Cannot allow counties to decrease density, which is generally a good thing. We're totally on board with that from an infill development standpoint, from a smart growth standpoint. But where some of the bills are going maybe a little bit too far is where they're like, oh no, hands down, the county can't downzone, period. Where we're like, for infill purposes, it's solid. But we're talking about coastal or climate hazards, the ability to downzone, we still want to definitely preserve that. And we do see Kauai, not maybe tomorrow, but in the future, tackling the daunting legal task of downzoning coastal properties. And so, and for the specific purpose of coastal resiliency. So from that aspect, we're kind of watching that some bills like SB 2018 sailed through relatively quickly their first hearing, which was kind of like, good, check our powers, but still give us the powers to address coastal hazards and climate hazards through our zoning powers. So that's one thing we're watching particularly closely as it relates to the commission's
Good
goals.
point. Thank you. Members, any questions or comments? Members of the public, any questions or comments?
Is there
Henry?
any race to downzone before the bill passes?
No, the downzoning is a very, very tricky legal process. We attempted a couple years ago. We put Jody's name on the letter to all the property owners when we did it, not mine. So she dealt with that, and it was our first attempt at doing it. We had some stumbling blocks on that, but I think we would like to do it. But there's no way we could tackle a full downzone within the next 4 to 5 months.
Good point. Okay. Thank you. Moving, anything else? No. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and moving on to our representative from DPED, Monique Schaefer.
Right, yes, lots going on here at DPED and the State Energy Office. We are really, aside from LEDGE, we are going after a lot of federal grant opportunities, both formula funded as well as competitive. So you still have to apply for formula grants and design programs. I would say the main themes around the grants we are applying to aggressively include energy efficiency. So we were one of 4 states selected to apply early for $68 million in funding for energy efficiency, focusing on low-income disadvantaged communities and doubling down sort of on the efficiency programs that we have for appliances and then energy retrofits. And then the second theme I think would say of our competitive and formula grants is really around energy resilience and energy security. So we have several grants out for both FEMA and DOE on building electric grid resiliency. That's one big bucket of work that we are working on. Legislative goals, I think Rep. Lowen listed many of the bills that we are tracking and monitoring, and we are really trying to cite to our decarb report as we provide testimony, and I'll be presenting on that later, so I won't beat the drum too hard on that. And then finally working hand in hand in lockstep with the Climate Commission on the Priority Climate Action Plan and follow on to that, the implementation grant. So our office has agreed to lead in a coalition application for a competitive grant for greenhouse gas reduction. And very excited to be working with the commission, the counties, and various community partners. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Any members, any comments or questions for Monique? If not, members of the general public, any comments or questions? Okay. All right. That concludes our member updates. We'll move on to item 4, strategies for equity on climate solutions. And we're going to ask Deputy Director Ducott for an example of efforts. Go ahead, Katie.
I think before we had quorum, there was some discussion by Nancy, basically thanking the efforts of OPSD with regard to grant opportunities. And so I want to relate back to that because when it comes to equity, I think a big part of it is just knowing that, at least for our particular program and communities, is just knowing and being aware that we are part of the larger community and we have specific needs given where we are, which tend to be, along the coastlines and older neighborhoods. And that, including us in conversations, remembering that, we might benefit from grant opportunities that you're working on. One of the more recent discussions we had that was coordinated with DLNR through the UHC grant came to us, as an opportunity to help some of our beneficiaries, in particular MOCUs. So that kind of idea of just making sure when it comes to equity that having a seat at the table is really important, knowing that we're out there and that having an eye towards, when you're looking at grant opportunities, whether or not DHHL in particular, but Native Hawaiians also. I know that OHA is here as well, right? That we can work collaboratively, and we're here, and we have limited resources. So if you keep us in mind and you come to us, I think there is definitely an appreciation, and we would love to work with any and all opportunities that would mutually benefit the state at large, as well as our particular communities in general. So I just wanted to open with that. Really, our subject matter expert, though, is Nancy, who I know is in the room. So I'm not sure, Nancy, if you want to expand on that or reserve comments.
Sure, thanks, Katie. I think the main thing is that the guidance from this commission is being taken to heart by state and county agencies throughout. Some more than others, we won't name names, but we do want to definitely let counties know in particular to reach out to us, get a hold of me, get a hold of Katie, you know, if you have opportunities, if you have plans, and you really want to make sure that there's beneficiary input, because sometimes our beneficiaries feel like, you know, this is for the general public and it's kind of not our cup of tea, you know, and so we have to do a lot of sort of going the extra mile to reach our beneficiary communities and make sure that their needs are being addressed by other agencies. So what I just wanted to say is that DHHO really appreciates the guidance from this commission. Also, Honolulu City and County has been a real leader. Kauai County has been a real leader. Hawaii County, you know, and you guys are awesome, and you're always thinking of our homestead communities, and we really appreciate that. So, but as far as climate change impacts, I think we all know when we talk about you know, vulnerable communities, a lot of times we are talking about Hawaiian homelands. And we also have the luxury of having, well, I won't say it's a luxury, but we have the asset of having a lot of lands, more Mauka, except they're more remote in a lot of cases. They don't have infrastructure. So we're really hoping long-term that the legislature realizes this, the federal government. We have the chairman and some staff in Washington, D.C. right now meeting with agencies, trying to get that federal funding directly. And I think long-term, some of that is definitely going to have to be looking at relocating communities out of harm's way long-term, and also providing more homesteading, you know, at higher elevations. So we're kind of playing the long game here, but you know, we really appreciate all the hard work that this commission has done, and the other climate change commissions across the state, and always thinking of Hawaiian homelands. We're really, really grateful for that, and so are our beneficiaries.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Katie. Members, any questions? Let's see. No, members of the public? Henry?
I do have one question. I assume first you want to put additional beneficiaries on land before you relocate those who already have homes.
Yes, that's the priority right now.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, I think, are we ready to move on to item 5?
If it's okay, you know, the item for this was actually led, you know, this is an item that Chair Chang asked for, and it was to open up a conversation with folks here on how can we be more focused on equity as we're addressing climate issues. So if it's okay to open up to other folks to see if they have thoughts on strategies that we as a commission could be enacting to make sure we're being equitable as we're addressing climate change, things that are either already in motion or things that we could be doing better.
Thank you, Leah. Dr. Felton, I know that Department of Health is looking at Alice households and households that are going to be impacted by heat but may not have as many resources to deal with that as others. Is there a focus in some of your projects under the health climate change initiative on equity?
Definitely, and happy to we're working closely with our fairly new Office of Health Equity in the Department of Health on some of these issues. And the soon to come out vulnerability assessment really tries to address the equity issues under each topic. And it's I don't even have the right words for it, but it's overwhelming. When you look at, you know, the impending health impacts are overwhelming in general. And then when you specifically try to look at, you know, communities that have more resource needs and, you know, are adversely impacted by the social determinants of health already, it really just sort of magnifies. So we've been calling it a risk magnifier. So yeah, and unfortunately, thinking about how to mitigate, or I guess in this case, adapt to those issues is really sort of the next phases of some of our work planned, because reaching vulnerable communities around regular health issues is already quite difficult. And this sort of adds another layer. So we're hoping to be able to sort of incorporate into some of the existing efforts on equity and health equity specifically, and then, you know, start to identify some of those more localized areas as that have been identified by such, you know, projects that the commission has worked on, that UH has worked on.
Okay.
So it's a big focus. Don't have a lot of solutions yet.
Oh, that would be true for a lot of problems.
Chair Hurd has her hand up.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Chair Hurd.
You're on mute, Sharon.
Yeah, thanks. Takes me a while to maneuver my own screen. You know, climate change and climate mitigation, climate adaptation, almost everything has a dotted line that leads back, right? It's just how far out you want to go. As far as equity for climate solutions, I'm finding that for agriculture, the equity is with the commodities, because a lot of times the people that I talk to, for instance, say that really, if you're a rancher, grass produces more, sequesters more carbon than other types of plants, because grass grows, the cows eat it, then it comes back again. So you're constantly producing photosynthesis, sequestering carbon, but it's really not paid attention to as much as conservation or forestry or even agroforestry. So the equity here would be via commodities. The other equity I would like to point out is, it's my own weakness, but with the diverse populations that we speak to in agriculture, when you say carbon sequestration, that is a really tough concept for the farmers to understand. So what I've taken to do is I've started asking around, what's the benefit to sequester carbon in the soil? Sure, you pull it out of the air in the form of CO2, you create oxygen, and you store the carbon in the soil. If I can make a dotted line sense to why a farmer benefits from sequestering carbon in his soil versus using organic fertilizers with carbon already in, you know, in the input, I think I could make more inroads with carbon sequestration as part of climate change mitigation, as far, you know, with the commodities that I work with. I've asked some pretty smart people, what's the benefit to having carbon in the soil? And the answer is because carbon produces the nutrients and the worms and the things that you need. I don't know, because farmers can get worms, you know, other ways. So I'm just asking for help. In terms of strategies on equity for climate solutions, if I need to bring in the ag community, which I really want to do, the farmer will say, I'd rather plant basil instead of, you know, holding my soil for climate or healthy soil cover cropping. I'd rather plant basil because, you know, I can make a lot of money in 1 year instead of holding my land for a year. That's the kind of strategy I'm having difficult times with. So enough from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Yes, that's, we've heard from farmers and ranchers before that the burden of climate change should not fall solely on them, because agriculture is economically vulnerable already, and they need all the help we can provide. Thank you. Members, any questions for Department of Agriculture? Members of the public? If not, anybody else who'd like to?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like,
Go
to
ahead.
Nancy's point, I think on our last point about, you know, looking in the long play of some of the homesteaders possibly having to be moved out, entire communities with this managed street strategy. I can say with our climate adaptation plan drafting going on right now, of course, that's a definite part of something we're trying to tackle. And I think I mentioned before that the county of Kauai had, well, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, purchased 400 acres on the west side. 350 of those acres are pretty much just going to be used for climate adaptation as far as buffer zone areas. About 50 of those acres have been set aside for housing, with some of that acreage also in a very tentative manner set aside for climate adaptation, particularly for a possibility of a land swap program for coastal properties. I don't wanna jump the gun here, because Marie Williams, our long range chief, and Alicia Summers are working on those drafts right now. From a land swap thing, and I hope maybe Alicia and Marie can prove the statement wrong, but it looks like it's not gonna work.
Okay.
And then the reason being that to do a land swap program, for the purpose of management, you have to have a situation in which the coastal property owner wants to trade.
Yeah.
So you just have to wait until that peak time when the water is probably lapping at their foundation. That's when they want to trade.
Yeah.
And we have to have property set aside with infrastructure, right? All set up, water, sewer, everything's all set up on the possibility that this trade might happen.
Ouch.
And the reason we're saying this probably won't work is how can the county sit on vacant lots, fully infrastructure out in the middle of a housing crisis, waiting, right? So the politics of that really, you don't see happening. Alicia's gonna take a stab at it and is working at it, but tentatively, like, we're not sure this is gonna work. From a transfer of development rights standpoint, I think I've said before, we're gonna drop the policy, and with the billions of dollars that are wrapped up in the value of coastal lands on the global speculative market, in order for the market to bear this managed treat, having a transfer of development rights and letting people get paid, say, to possibly transfer the development rights for albeit ag gentleman estates, right? That's how some of these coastal values can be made whole. That's a big policy thing that we're gonna have to tackle, and perhaps sacrificing, say, 450 ag gentleman estates to move vulnerable properties that could be subjecting lawsuits to the county and to the state. It is a policy question that's gonna be fascinating to watch unfold, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
But on the equity side, something that has kind of piqued our interest through the cap drafting is this notion of, well, the state and county providing funds for the buyouts of these properties. Now, with the billions of dollars wrapped up in our coastlines of values, we're not gonna get that money for the entire coastline. And I don't think the taxpayers are willing to say, let's bail out these multimillionaires that decided to build in these areas.
Yeah.
But when, say, if you're looking at kind of what's kind of being vetted out through the process is, say, indigenous families that still have these lots, local lines that still have these lots. There's not many, but the few that are out there, is there an opportunity to say, if it is really vulnerable, can we pay, would the state be willing to provide funds to pay for that value? If it's worth 2 million, 3 million, 4 million on the market, we'll pay for that value. The state and county would then own it, but then would lease it back or sign a stewardship agreement with those families so they could still, use those lots in a manner that is in keeping with the traditions that was used before. And a possible pilot is shaping up on Kauai, where there is I'm sorry how much I can release. There's a family that has a property in a very pristine area that's absolutely worth a lot on the market. They don't have a house on it. They've got lo'i kalo on it, and they want to continue that. And so discussions are going on. Would the state and county be willing to buy it and then lease it back for traditional purposes? And from an equity standpoint, I think that's where that discussion is leading, and where it ends up, I'm not sure, but perhaps the next 8 to 12 months, we might have that pilot project to see what issues may pop up, or if we're able to push it all the way through. But it's one area that came up in those things about when Nancy mentioned the moving of homesteaders out.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on our discussion on equity in climate change?
I'll just add, for the ending, this is something that it's very central to all the work that, I try to do, that we're going to be trying to do in our party climate action plans. But definitely, if you ever see us falter, call us out on it, because we want to make sure that it is at the center. And sometimes we get so stuck into the work that, we need to take a step back and make sure that everyone's included. So yeah, this is an open conversation.
Can I just mention that I thought that the climate equity and the need to incorporate traditional ecological knowledge has been addressed in the Nature-Based Resilience and Adaptation to Climate Change in Hawaii, a Climate Ready Hawaii Working Paper document, which is available online, right, on your website. And I thought that was really impressive. I recommend that everyone read that, and particularly pages 2 to 3 talk a lot about centering this work in traditional cultural values of the first peoples of this place.
Thank you, Nancy. And congratulations to the Climate Ready Hawaii initiative, which, Gabby, are you part of that now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, any other further discussion on this agenda item? Seeing none, we're going to move on to Monique Schaefer, who's going to do a presentation on the statewide decarbonization strategy. Go ahead, Monique. Do you need to share your screen?
I think I made her co-host.
I do. Just pull up my slides and let me know when you can see it.
We can see the, yes, plus the, the slides down the left hand.
All of it. I will be sure to pull. Okay. All right.
There you go, full screen.
Perfect. For those of you who weren't aware, I'll dive right into it. So Act 238 was assigned the State Energy Office to do a variety of things. There were 13 different requirements. And really, the core of it was analyzing the pathways and developing recommendations for achieving the state's economy-wide decarbonization goals. Those goals are really set forth in HRS 225P-5. A lot of you, of course, are familiar with this. But it is to sequester more carbon than emitted as quickly as practicable, but no later than 2045, with an interim target of 50% by 2030. I think these targets are often, like, people interpret them as sort of haphazard. And, I think in our research and through the study itself, it really became clear that, these are really based on nationally determined contributions. So when you think of, the big picture is we need to get to zero as close as practicable. But the targets that are set are really based on IPCC recommendations, and then how the nation has determined will contribute to the Paris Climate Agreement. And then this is really our state's contribution to that. So it's not haphazard. These goals are set for a reason. The time is there for a reason. And I think I really just want to stress that when we are talking about climate targets, they are indeed science-based. They are not just thrown out there. We were required to consult and collaborate with state agencies, counties, and relevant stakeholder organizations. So that was a big part of the report. And then the focus of the report was really on state actions, recognizing that there is a federal, county, and private sector role to play. So there are really 3 tiers. There was the modeling components, which involved quite a bit of quantitative analysis. So we took the existing greenhouse gas inventory and benchmarked all of our models to that inventory to do projections through 2045 based on, various things that we know are technically feasible. So things like the renewable portfolio standard, the energy efficiency portfolio standards, actions that we know to be effective in natural working lands, and then waste as well. And then transportation, of course, vehicle miles traveled, and electrification of our transit options and alternative fuels. The second tier was really that outreach and engagement. And I think it's important to recognize that this tier, this outreach and engagement, we're still actively working on it. So we do have the report up on our website. And in addition to that, we do have a place for folks to provide comments on. And I think we're really going to be looking at taking the report out, taking the concepts and ideas out to the public and sharing these next couple of years. And then finally, there was additional analysis and recommendations. So the greenhouse gas inventory, which tracks, our progress, that's what we sort of interpreted as sort of what is tracking our progress towards our decarb goals. But there are shortfalls, there's accounting shortfalls, and we do recognize that in the report and sort of point out ways to improve our accounting. So outreach, we did a lot of outreach via our website. So we had different information up and then surveys. We did a lot of one-on-one stakeholder discussions with, Hawaiian Electric, FAR, Hawaiian Airlines, some of the bigger emitters out there of greenhouse gases. But we also took it sort of to the grassroots level, teamed up with the Climate Commission. Leah was super critical, and we really tried strategically to pair our outreach so as to not overburden different community groups with outreach. And then we also had 4 really targeted convenings with distinct participants with a focus on equity, different focus groups on equity, land use and transportation, and then the different trade-offs associated with decarbonization actions. And then there were 2 public webinars that had over 100 distinct participants. So we had really good participation. And then a lot of people did look at our recordings online for those webinars. And they're still posted online. So if you have free time, feel free to take a look at the webinars. And we may do another one. We're kind of floating the idea of doing a talk story session or more webinars just to present the results. So I'll go fast through this. I don't think this is really old information or new information for most of the folks online. But if you look at our emissions since 1990, they've been relatively flat, right? Not a lot of change. And in the next, 25 years, we have a lot of change to make if we want to get to our emissions reduction goals. You can see here, most of the steep declines in emissions are tied to times of economic recession. So it's really important that we decouple our emissions from the success of the economy. So that was definitely a major finding. And I always find it interesting, COVID, the emissions numbers during COVID, they declined, but they didn't decline all that much. And to me, that's really telling of behavioral change is very important. It's critical. It gets us very far. But we still need technological change as well. So you have to pair behavioral switches. You can't just shut down the economy and achieve your emissions reductions. You really have to incorporate technology as well to meet your goals, our goals, not just for our goals. So that's that. Greenhouse gas emitting sectors in Hawaii. Again, this is from the Department of Health, the Clean Air Branch Greenhouse Gas Inventory, the most recent report. Just where we're at today, most of our emissions do come from the energy sector, and it is stationary combustion. So the highest, we often hear transportation is one, and that's true if you add ground, marine, and aviation together. But stationary combustion remains the #1 emitter in the state. And that's critical because as we transition our ground transportation to electrification, we want to make sure that this stationary combustion or electricity, our grid, is clean as well. So we're not just adding, transferring emissions from one sector to another.
That's using the coal data though, right?
Yeah, so that is correct. This is from 2019. We do anticipate a small decrease in emissions after the coal plant retired. There's, some of that energy was definitely replaced with petroleum. So, I think once we see the battery come online, and then the major renewable energy projects that replace the coal plant will see even more emissions reductions, probably 24. 25 is when you're actually going to see those emissions start to decline. Other non-energy sectors, I think this is important, and I just want to caveat with these are the harder sectors to account for. So there's a higher margin of error whenever you're talking about non-energy sector emissions. It's just easier to account for your energy sector. And there's accounting challenges, like with transportation, it's based on your fuel demand and emissions factors that you tie to burn rates and such. So there is accounting sort of margin of errors. They're even higher in the waste, forestry, and industrial sectors. If you take a look at this, our non-energy sector emissions largely come from the agricultural soil carbon as well as our refrigerants. So refrigerant management is a high global warming potential substance that we use to replace our ozone depleting substances, but it turns out what we replaced ozone depleting substances with, it was our HFCs and PFCs, which are high global warming potential greenhouse gases. Just want to point out, I think this is a really relevant chart, and I think, you know, we'll probably go down a few bars now that we've canceled the coal plant. But, you know, on Oahu, if you look at just our combustion facilities, we combust petroleum. So we have the highest emissions intensity in the country. So per kilowatt hour of energy produced, Oahu has the highest CO2 equivalent produced out of the power plants that we have in the state. So power plant efficiency is also really critical as we look forward into the future. And the outer islands are also above the US average. Per capita, it's pretty obvious Honolulu is going to be up there in emissions. And if you look at it per capita, it's a little bit more equal, but Honolulu also has the highest because we do a lot of the refining. A lot of the goods get shipped to Honolulu at first, more industrial activity in Honolulu. And then Hawaii and Maui counties tend to have higher emissions per capita than Kauai. So pathways modeling, this is our projection analysis, how we sort of looked at, you know, the way to get to net zero. So all of our mitigation scenarios, so S1 through S3, they looked at sort of different ways of achieving the same goal, different ways of achieving net negative or net zero. As well as a business as usual reference scenario. This did assume that Hawaiian Electric met its renewable portfolio standard. So that was a big major assumption. And it's important that we do plow forward with the renewable portfolio standard. Major differences between scenarios. You know, one was really focused on what happens if we kind of keep our energy demand the same and we just do technological switches. The second scenario was really focused on driving down energy demand. So what happens if we do what's technically feasible for energy efficiency in buildings as well as VMT reductions? And then the third relied less. It's kind of the focus, it was on reducing emissions and relying less on sort of the sequestration or the net the net sort of sequestration piece of the puzzle, because we know that accounting for sequestration can have that wide margin of error. So we kind of asked the question, how far can we get without having to rely on sequestration, which we should be doing regardless. There's a huge co-benefit to any sequestration, particularly in natural working lands. So it was really focused on doubling down on emissions reductions versus sequestration. Some of the main takeaways, this is a big report. It's really hard to get everything in a short presentation. But, you know, driving forces, I think we know these takeaways. It's electric and transportation sector, you know, focusing on those two sectors is really critical for reducing economy-wide emissions, just because they are such a large portion of the pie. The most cost-effective pathway is energy efficiency. We've known this for a very long time, and I think our report just is yet another report to tell us and vindicate that we know energy efficiency, grid services, demand response, those programs are really effective at reducing electricity demand, and thus very effective at reducing emissions in the electric sector. Transportation, you know, there is, of course, anytime you are switching fuels, there's a trade-off. So you want to be mindful. You're not, you know, just electrifying everything, because that does have implications for the grid and how much energy we have to build out. There's no getting away from it. Alternative fuels will play a significant role in decarbonization. And I think this is really where you get into the importance of carbon accounting and life cycle analysis, because not all alternative fuels are created equally. So, you know, the importance of policies that ensure, for example, Hawaiian Electric is evaluating life cycle emissions from well to pump and upstream. So evaluating, you know, how feedstocks are grown, you know, are we getting our alternative fuels, particularly biofuels, from clean sources? Are they low? Do they have low carbon intensities? That will be really critical moving forward. And this is really important for the aviation sector. And, you know, I think it's really important to just recognize we do have a significant natural carbon sink potential in Hawaii. We have to take care of our soils. We have to take care of our forests. You know, forest fires are, of course, a big source of emissions. So vegetation management, soil amendments, you know, although there's a high margin of variability, so it gets hairy when you start counting these things as sort of offsets. But nonetheless, it's critical to do. That's the one. So, you know, here's sort of what we are looking at in terms of the emissions reductions by sector for each scenario. So combined economy-wide, if we just continue down business as usual with you know, the RPS just focused on the electricity sector alone, we really only get to about 11 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent annually by 2045. So, you know, different pathways kind of all end up in the same spot, but they do have differences in costs. I thought I heard somebody. Feel free to interrupt me. I'm fine if you have questions. Okay. So that's, you know, really interesting thing. And then You know, the second scenario, I think it's really goes to show how far efficiency will get us. It's just, you know, the aggressive efficiency adoption really put us ahead of the curve in emissions reductions, particularly in the short term. And then it's important to look at electricity demand. So a lot of emissions reductions are driven by the electric sector as the transportation sector converts to electric vehicles. And I think we ran this model like 4 or 5 times because we were so shocked to see actually electricity demand be reduced even with really aggressive electrification of the transportation sector. So if you adopt efficiency metrics in, you know, your buildings, you do demand response, grid service projects that are all technically feasible, you actually see in the short term electricity demand go down. And that's pretty profound if you think about it, because we are still electrifying to clean up, but we do have in our toolbox LED lighting, things that, you know, are easy to adopt and very cost effective and save ratepayers and community members money. And those mechanisms are effective at reducing load. And I think, you know, we're really working on in the energy office on programs that are doubling down on these efficiency measures to reduce the electric load in the near term. And then in the long term, you know, electricity demand does increase. That is driven by electrification. But again, it's not as much of an increase as was modeled in the, for example, Hawaiian Electric report, because they just didn't use really aggressive efficiency measures across the board. This is kind of a same way of looking at this different way of looking at the same data. And this goes to fuel demand. So you see that, you know, there is going to be a significant demand for, you know, renewable jet kerosene. So even with, you know, flights, we had one scenario where we assumed longer visitor arrival days to slightly reduce aviation demand, but you still have to make up for that with, you know, an alternative jet fuel. And I'll get into some of the implications of, you know, carbon accounting. I will say this assumption was that biofuels are net neutral. And we know that's not true at all. And I think that's, you know, we did that because that's the current accounting framework set forth by the greenhouse gas inventory. But if we really want to stay tried and true to our goals, we want to really look at carbon intensity standards for renewable fuels. Different way of looking at the same data, lots of numbers. I'm not going to show you or like go through every single line item. That would be a lot, but I do want to draw your attention. We did do a cost analysis for capital expenditures, and this again is that 500,000 foot view. It's very, you know, high level, and we did again see major net savings in this second scenario where we had doubled down on efficiency. And, you know, in scenario 3, it was our most expensive scenarios. And I think that goes hats off to natural working lands for being very cost effective at sequestering carbon. And then also, the high cost, we did have a negative emissions technology. So capturing carbon from the air and sequestering it underground. Long-term plan, definitely a very long-term outlook. But that's not very cost effective. It's very costly, energy intensive to do that. And that's why you see the higher costs here. So emissions beyond the inventory, I think we use the greenhouse gas inventory as a tool. It's a really great tool for us to track our emissions and sort of know where we're at. But it's also important to recognize that IPCC guidance and the guidance that we're given, it puts us in a box. So it puts Hawaii in sort of, here's your emissions from in-state. It's not incorporating imported emissions from out of state. So, there are other methods that you would want to supplement. It's not, in place of your typical production-based emissions inventory. So that's what we have today. It's really shifting towards more of a supplement to the production-based emissions inventory and doing consumption-based. So you're accounting for, shipments in of, for example, food. We import a lot of our food, and if you were to grow it, here in some instances that would actually not look great on your production-based emissions inventory. But if you had a consumption-based emissions inventory, it just shows a better, more holistic picture. Same thing, life cycle greenhouse gas analysis. I think this is really what's critical as we move towards alternative fuels. So, inclusive of biofuels, even hydrogen. We know it burns clean, but upstream, it's very dependent on how the hydrogen's created. It's very dependent on the feedstock used for your biofuels. So that is a very critical component of any analysis moving forward. And then finally, carbon offsets. I think it's important to acknowledge we are going to need sequestration, but we should only use that sequestration for our hardest to abate emissions. So it shouldn't be used as a alternative to doing what we can in emissions reduction. But it has to be something that we put forth as, really just, it has a lot of co-benefits if you're applying it to the natural working lands sector, but B, it's not a substitute for emissions reduction. So next steps for us, we are planning to familiarize the public, take this out, share it widely. Definitely are in the middle of soliciting report feedback. We are really trying to use the report in our legislative testimony and encourage other folks to use it too. Hopefully you can do a nice Control F and get some material for testimony. And, I think we are also using this to support our PCAP and implementation grants. It set us up very nicely for the greenhouse gas modeling that is required for the EPA grants. Whew, that was a lot. I'm a bit winded. The report is available on our website, energyhawaii.gov. This is the direct QR code to the decarbonization webpage. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Monique. Members, questions or comments? Members of the public, questions or comments? Henry.
Where is the carbon stored in the direct air capture?
It's a great question. I think, first and foremost, if we were to do any sort of storage long-term, if we wanted to do it geologically, we have to have it's very similar to geothermal. You have to have a really solid understanding of what your geological substrate is. You're going deep underground. There's all sorts of, primacy issues. There is a whole appendix in the report that discusses this, the last appendix. That's really probably one of the best long-term storage options. Again, it's super expensive. But it's, again, it is an option we should be exploring. And if it's not a good fit for Hawaii, we have to really lean on our geologists, folks at the Department of Health, so there's not, migration of pollutants. You're not, destroying deep freshwater aquifers that might be down there. So, that's the assumption. If you do direct air capture, you are storing it geologically.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, comments, anyone?
Question from Casey.
I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Casey.
I just want to say mahalo to Monique for that. Being a new member, I found that presentation very informative. I had one question. The stationary combustion, could you define that? Or I don't know if it would help to put it in there. I don't know what are the activities, what kind of equipment constitutes stationary combustion?
Yeah, totally. It's mostly the electricity industries. So that's HECO, that's Kahe power plant, that's H power, anything that's really producing energy for the grid tends to go, if it's a point source power plant, it's stationary combustion.
Okay, so that doesn't include residential types of combustion as well?
No, that's actually, I'll go back. It's a good question. That tends to go down into this like non-energy use category.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Could you say more about the decision, or I don't know if it was a decision, but assuming that biofuels for alternative jet fuels are net neutral?
Monique, did you hear the question?
Yeah, I think I did. So it was an assumption made. It's an accounting assumption. It made our modeling quite a bit easier, and it's a shortfall. I will come out and say it is absolutely a shortfall of the analysis. And I think in order to really improve that, we need to have a framework for how we account for biogenic emissions. Because, if you look at the inventory, it's totally separated. It's a line item, but it's not something we have an accounting framework for, and that would be needed like a whole new scope. It would take another 2 years to really develop that. And I think, there's a few bills, the Clean Fuel Standard being one of them, that really kind of stress this issue. We do need carbon intensity metrics around our alternative fuels.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Do you see any, Leah? No. Okay, thank you, Monique. That was an amazing presentation. I think I'm going to have to revisit it to absorb, more of it. So we'll move on to agenda item 6, update on the Environmental Protection Agency Climate Pollution Reduction Grant awarded to the Commission for Climate Action Planning. Go ahead, Leah.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to give you folks an update on some of the work that we've been working on with this EPA award. What we've been doing with the funding so far is hiring a contractor to help us with our priority climate action plan. The contractor will really help us be, drafting the plan itself, pulling from a lot of information that's already been done by the decarb strategy, and all the hard work that the counties have put into their various climate action plans. And then also importantly, they'll be conducting the greenhouse gas analysis of the projects that we're putting into our priority climate action plan. We also put funding towards our program specialist, Booty, who's on the call here, Mel and Bill, who you also met earlier. to really help us with the outreach pieces and making sure that we have good coordination across, state, county, and community jurisdictions. We have a website up. It's at climate.hawaii.gov. It talks about the climate action plan in a little bit more detail, and it has some of the information that I'll share with you in this presentation, but just in case you're curious to see where we're at or for updates, please visit that. So the EPA grant funded two major milestones. One is this priority climate action plan, and that's really a prerequisite for applying for the EPA's implementation grant of the same name. That's a pot of I think it's 4.3 billion now of funding across the nation. It's pretty big. We're pretty excited about it. And then there's the comprehensive climate action plan, which we'll be focusing on once we finish the priority one, and that's a longer term timeline. These are both focused on mitigation plans, but I think our intention for the comprehensive climate action plan is to look at the resiliency and then therefore adaptation with this too, because I think we understand that they go hand in hand. We definitely have to work holistically for these. So here's our timeline. We're maybe a little bit further along than where this is now. But our biggest deadline that we're coming up against is March 1st, when our priority climate action plan is due. So we're fiercely working with our contractors to make sure that's happening. Again, it's really vital that we include all of the types of projects that we would want to see going into this implementation grant, which is due on April 1st, to ensure that they're eligible for that implementation grant. The comprehensive climate action plan will be due summer 2025, and then finally we have a status report in 2027. So we've decided to go in as a coalition for the implementation grant. HSCO has offered to lead this coalition, so big mahalo to Monique and HSCO for taking that on. It's a really, really big lift, and I think Monique thought she might have a little bit of breathing room after the decarb strategy, and said, no, you want to keep on going. So we got a marathon runner on our hands. We realize it's really important for us to coordinate efforts and leverage resources for this. So we are partnering with all 4 counties on this. And then the Department of Land and Natural Resources as the commission are also going to be a part of this coalition. We put out an RFI at I want to say it was in December or November, we put it out. And we're really impressed because we put it out during that holiday season, which is really hard for people to get in projects. The due date was early January, yet we still got 20 different project proposals with over $100 million in projects. We were really flexible in the project scope. We said, like, please follow the notice of funding opportunity that the EPA put out. We put in some guidelines, but we were open to any type of project. And we're really excited to get a cross sector of different types of projects, everything from agriculture, forestry, and land use, the waste sector, transportation, and energy projects. So very well-rounded group of projects that we've received. We are moving forward with about 15 different projects that we've selected. Again, we're keeping it cross-sector with all these different groups. The way the EPA has organized this funding opportunity is by these tiers. And it's been, something that's been keeping Monique and I up at night is which tier is most appropriate for us to be applying for. The EPA set up so you're competitive within each of your tiers. As a smaller state, we're pretty much comfortably resting in this tier D, which is 10 to just under 50 million. We have such great projects that we would love to go into that tier C. I'm not saying it's completely out of the question, but just precautionary principle, we might stay within the tier D to just make sure that we get as many things funded as possible. But we're one of the things that we are most excited about receiving all these projects, even the projects we haven't selected, are really excellent and great, and we want to continue to work with these folks to make sure that we find other sources of funding. This isn't our only opportunity, but we want to keep doing that. And we've also seen a lot of opportunity for collaboration between the different projects. So this is exactly what we wanted to see, and what we wanted to start doing is bringing folks together that are interested in working in similar activities so that we can learn from each other and again leverage resources. And that's it for that.
Okay. Comments or questions? Members first. Anything that you'd like to ask about the progress on this grant? And thank you to the Hawaii State Energy Office for partnering with this. This is great. Members of the public?
Are
Henry?
the individual companies that you've selected available for the public to see?
No, we actually, Monique, did we put it officially anywhere?
It might be on hands. I need to double check on that. But we will probably post something soon once we sort of finalize the budget.
Yeah, but we'll definitely make sure to get that information.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, any other comments or questions on this agenda item? If not, we're going to move on to item 9, our state climate change coordinators update. Go ahead, Leah.
Hello again, everyone. Okay, great. So first I wanted to share our Climate Smart Assistance Program that I think I presented a few meetings ago. We will be opening an RFP soon. So this is to support climate smart agricultural practices, forestry, farming, and ranching across the state for eligible lands. So eligible lands are pretty much any lands in the state. You know, the goals of this are to increase productivity, enhance resilience, obviously greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and enhance food security and development goals. I just wanted to throw this out here for everybody because we had an RFP out earlier or last year, and we didn't get a ton of applicants. And so we just want to make sure that we're doing a lot of pre-notification that, you know, this is an opportunity for folks to utilize funding for things such as cover crops, windbreaks, so planting trees, agroforestry, intensive grazing for ranching, and various other activities that we do know help to build carbon in soils or vegetation or what have you, or reduce the emissions of carbon. So yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know. This will be coming out sometime soon. We're also coordinating with UH's Climate Smart Commodities actions. They have 3 major objectives: to develop the tools to identify, you know, what carbon smart practices are, to build a market, and get money to producers. And that's really the intention of this, is that we know that there already is so much pressure on our agricultural sector from climate change. This is a way to help to support folks to implement these practices without additional burden on themselves, providing both technical assistance and funding.
Leah, quick question.
Yes.
Will there be access to more information about this on the Climate Commission website or somewhere else?
Not currently, but yes, we are. Wonderful Gabby's helping me to put together some promotional material. So it will definitely be out in our newsletter once that's out and ready. And I can also send an email out to everybody, letting you know when we have more information. It's live on the website. Thank you.
Does the cover crops include solar farms?
No. It could be if you were doing agriculture on solar fields.
Right.
That could be an activity, but solar wouldn't count as a cover crop.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're underneath solar panels, you're doing some agriculture and some cover
Yeah.
crops, that would be
Yeah.
covered.
Yes. Community climate fairs. We're starting to think about our community climate fairs. We had really great success last year with our one on Oahu and one on Hawaii Island. We're hoping, you know, spring, summer of this year to host additional community climate fairs. This year we have additional capacity with Mel on Maui that's going to help us put it together. We're going to be partnering with existing activities on Kauai and Molokai because that's kind of the feedback we've gotten. is that, that would be the best way to move forward. But if anyone's interested in participating in these, again, please let me know.
Thanks, Sam.
Mhm. I'll go back. Oh yes, Sharon.
I wanted to just clarify the previous question on solar projects. The department has been pretty clear on our testimony, and I believe in the defining of solar energy and and on agricultural lands. And the question I think was proposed was, as long as there's agriculture production, and it has to be productive, profitable agriculture production. What we have opposed is a solar project that has goats underneath the solar panels to eat the grass. This is not a productive agricultural producing project. Just a clarification, you have to actually be producing something for profit or commercial production. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hurd. Yeah, we've seen these proposals for sheep. I'm telling people, when are the lamb chops coming? Anyway, okay, go ahead. It was
Yeah.
More slides.
No, thank you for that clarification, and we do have more slides. I'm just trying to see if it will update, because it didn't update some things that we were trying to do earlier. Also, I wanted to share that we are going to be having our climate week again. It's a little bit of a cheeky name for climate week, because we actually only have 2 days planned of actual meetings, but we will have it in, you can see this, yeah. So climate week is going to be, we're calling it March 23rd to 31st, it's the whole week. But really the key dates that we're going to be doing is March 27th and 28th. We'll be back at the Inman Conference Center. And it's really exciting, because we'll have folks coming up from DC to do the region's first, the National Climate Assessment release event. So as many of you know, the 5th National Climate Assessment recently came out. So they're going to be rolling out the Hawaii chapter here. And then we're also going to be hosting a student symposium, and hoping that will include grad students as well as some undergrad students from University of Hawaii, as well as hopefully some folks from University of Guam. We're also going to be talking about some of the climate policy priorities that are highlighted in the legislature this year. We're going to talk about the decarbonization strategy and some of the next steps. And then we're also going to be launching our comprehensive climate action plan, and kind of announcing to everyone that we're going to be putting this together and sharing, and hopefully getting people excited about it and involved.
Leah, will there be a fee to attend these 2 days?
There will not be a fee to attend. So it will be open to the public. We'll have registration up in the next couple weeks, but yeah, no fee. And then we had one more thing to share, and hopefully it will be updated here. Yes, okay. And Gabby is going to share one other project for us.
Yeah, so the last thing is the Honolulu Community Out Planning. This is like a shoreline restoration project scheduled currently for March 9th, and where we're working with community volunteers to plant a bunch of native vegetation. It should cover approximately 66 square feet, and that's dispersed among 11 different locations along the shoreline of Honolulu to help restore a lot of the erosion that's occurred up there.
A little bit louder, Gabby.
Currently, we're working with 4 native plants. Those include Akiaki, Hokuihui, Huhinahina, and Akulikuli. And that should help with strengthening the sand to help slow erosion in that area.
Okay,
This is a part of our Punaluu feasibility study that we've been doing.
Yeah.
So
this is what Amy reported on at the last meeting?
yes.
Okay. And I can see things are growing.
This is not from there. This is an example of
Oh,
what
shucks.
it could look like afterwards. This is what we're hoping to
Okay.
to make happen after March 9th.
Afterwards. Henry, you had a
I
comment.
know that further down the coast, there have been people who privately put plants along the shoreline to decrease access. So this is in conjunction with maintaining public access, right?
Yes, absolutely. Amy, if you're here, just want to give a shout out to Amy Works, who's been working really, really closely with the Punaluu Community Association. So this activity is in conjunction with them, and we've worked very closely with them to identify the locations of where they'd want to see the planting. Anything you want to add to that, Amy?
Oh, just that the plants that we've chosen that we'll be out planting with them are not ones that would grow out or propagate in a way that would disrupt lateral access along the shoreline. So they're the kinds of plants that should be there in the dune system and will be placed in a way that they hopefully enhance public uses of the park.
Well-behaved plants, huh? Okay. All right, Leah, anything further for the coordinators report?
That is all. Thank you all.
Okay, any questions, comments beyond? All right. I don't see any. That brings us to the end of our meeting. Let's see, and are there any final comments of members anyone wants to make? Do I see any?
Congratulations, you started late but finished early.
Thank you. Okay, my reading of Robert's rules is we do not need a motion to adjourn. And so I declare we're adjourned.
Great.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, everyone online.
Mahalo.